A cold morning settles over the Al-Zawaida camp, where rows of tents stretch into the distance and the market stirs with slow, weary movement. The place carries the familiar weight of displacement, where every day begins with the same rhythm of people searching for food, water, and a brief sense of normal life. Vendors arrange small assortments of items on wooden tables. Children walk between the stalls, and older men sit on overturned crates, scanning the camp with quiet, cautious eyes. On this day, however, the conversations rising between the tents drift toward a single topic: the killing of Yasser Abu Shabab, the leader of an armed group known inside the Gaza Strip for his fierce opposition to Hamas. In the narrow pathways of the market, the news spreads quickly. People speak about it not with shock, but with the weary certainty of those who believed this moment had been approaching for months. For many here, the end of a man long accused of exploiting them is not a tragedy, but a turning point, a release from a burden they had carried through some of the most difficult weeks of their lives. The market moves slowly, but beneath that slow movement, there is a subtle shift in tone. Conversations rise with more confidence, hands gesture more freely, and the tension that usually hangs in the air seems momentarily lighter. People describe what they lived through: the hunger, the checkpoints, the humiliation of seeing aid intercepted before it ever reached the families who needed it most. Every tent in the camp holds stories of those days when the struggle for food overshadowed everything else, and when armed men controlled not only the roads, but the fate of those trying to survive. The tents stand in long rows, battered by wind and dust, yet filled with people who have learned to endure. These shelters, temporary in design but long-term in reality, mark the landscape of displacement that has defined life for thousands. Moving between them is like walking through an open archive of hardship, with each family carrying their own memory of the months when desperation grew with every empty delivery truck and every failed distribution attempt. Near one corner of the camp, a man pauses as he hears others discussing the killing. The reaction is unmistakable. Many describe the moment they learned the news. Some nodded quietly, others exchanged brief looks of relief, and a few allowed themselves to smile for the first time in weeks. To them, the removal of a figure who stood between them and the aid meant for their children is not just an event. It is part of the long struggle to restore dignity in a place where survival depends heavily on who controls the flow of resources. One of the displaced Palestinians, Abu Sameh al-Gamri, speaks firmly and without hesitation, his voice shaped by the memory of hunger. He says, "The death of Yasser Abu Shabab was good news for us because he and the members of his militia were responsible for the disastrous situation we endured during the famine in the Gaza Strip. They set up checkpoints, stole humanitarian aid, and besieged us. He also openly collaborated with the occupier, the army. Such is the fate reserved for all traitors and thieves who deprive people of their livelihoods." His words capture not only personal anger, but the shared sentiment of families who felt trapped and manipulated. Around him, people remember the checkpoints. He described locations that appeared suddenly on roads leading into neighborhoods where aid trucks were expected to arrive. These barriers did not just slow the movement of supplies, they redirected them, ensuring that the goods intended for the public rarely reached their destination. The famine left deep scars on the camp, not only because of the hunger, but because of the bitter realization that fellow Palestinians contributed to the suffering. The camp's open spaces fill with voices repeating portions of al-Gamri's account, echoing how the militia seized the convoys that carried flour, canned food, and medicine. For many here, recalling those days brings back the feeling of powerlessness, the fear of lining up for food and being turned away, and the uncertainty of whether their children would eat that night. The death of Abu Shabab, as they describe it, closes a dark chapter in which survival depended on navigating a network of men with weapons rather than relying on the humanitarian system meant to protect civilians. Across another section of the camp, Mohammed Musin shares his view. His expression carries less anger and more exhaustion, the kind that comes from witnessing repeated cycles of betrayal and hardship. He says we all rejoice because he did a lot of harm to his people, the Gazans, by betraying them, betraying their land and their religion, stealing aid intended for Palestinian children and the Palestinian people. He betrayed Palestinian blood because Palestinians have always been united. His calm tone disguises the depth of his frustration, reflecting sentiments common among those who lived through both displacement and deprivation. His words highlight something that resonates widely among the displaced, the pain caused not only by outsiders, but by those from within who abuse their power. To many in the camp, unity is not an abstract idea, it is a lived necessity. In their eyes, betraying that unity, especially during famine, crosses a line that cannot be forgiven. People recall how the militia operated during the worst days of scarcity, showing little concern for the families struggling to endure. The theft of aid did not affect one home or one neighborhood. It rippled through entire communities, leaving children hungry and adults desperate. Even as the market continues its daily rhythm, the emotional impact of Muhsin's statement lingers. The disbelief that fellow Gazans could act against their own community remains a wound, and the death of Abu Shabab is discussed as an inevitable result of those choices. People speak of how wrong it felt to lose trust not only in relief operations, but in the very notion that everyone in Gaza was enduring the same hardship. This disillusionment shaped how they remember him and his militia, reinforcing the belief that accountability eventually arrives for those who deepen the suffering of the displaced. Nearby, another displaced Palestinian, Hassan Musler, reflects on the event with a different tone, more detached, more reflective. He says he posed no threat to me personally, but his end was predictable and inevitable. His words reflect a common conclusion heard throughout the camp, that someone who alienated and exploited so many could not expect to remain in power indefinitely. People discuss how his influence had been weakening, how resentment within communities had grown, and how the climate of fear around the militia had slowly eroded. In the days before his death, Musler and others had sensed that the situation was shifting. Whispers in the market hinted that his authority was cracking, that even those who once avoided speaking against him felt bolder. The camp residents described this sense of anticipation, a belief that the pattern of abuses would eventually provoke consequences. Musler's remark, though brief, captures that collective intuition, the understanding that a leader who steals from starving families cannot expect loyalty, and that the landscape of Gaza, often shaped by conflict, has little room for figures who rely on intimidation rather than community trust. As the afternoon progresses, movement increases around the camp. People bring water back to their tents, tend to small stoves, and prepare what little food they have. The conversations about Abu Shabab continue, but begin shifting toward what comes next. Some wonder whether his death will ease the movement of humanitarian aid, whether the checkpoints that once blocked their paths will disappear, and whether the system of control he relied on will dissolve without him. Others are cautious, noting that in Gaza, power rarely disappears, it shifts, rearranges, and reappears in other forms. Still, many here hope that the removal of a figure associated with their hunger will open a narrow door to stability. They talk about the famine not only as a past event, but as a warning. It forced them to confront the fragility of their situation and the dangers of relying on any group capable of exploiting desperation. For the displaced families, the most important outcome of his death is the belief that aid might finally reach them without interference, that children might receive the supplies that were once diverted, and that trust, long eroded, might slowly begin to rebuild. As the day edges toward evening, the wind moves through the lines of tents and market stalls, carrying the faint sound of conversations that blend relief with uncertainty. The tents, stitched and restitched by their residents, stand resilient against the coming night. In their shadows, the story of Abu Shabab's death continues to circulate not as a sensational event, but as the conclusion of a chapter defined by exploitation and famine. What remains in the camp is a shared sense that those who deepen suffering eventually lose their place, even in a territory marked by conflict. People here do not celebrate violence, but they acknowledge what they see as justice within their own lived reality. The displaced families of Al-Zawaida endure with the hope that without the interference of men who once stole from them, tomorrow may arrive with fewer burdens than today. And so the market winds down, the conversations soften, and the camp settles into night. The death of Yasser Abu Shabab becomes part of the Gaza narrative told quietly between tents, an episode that reinforces what many here already believed: that betrayal of one's own people yields consequences that even the most powerful cannot escape. In a place defined by struggle, what matters most now is whether the absence of those who once blocked aid will allow the smallest openings for relief, dignity, and survival to expand at last.